welcome back. This is our first video in Chapter 2, and we'll be going over in this section, sections 2.1 through 2.4.2. That's Chapter 2.1. So this chapter really is all about the number pi. So what is that? No, not really, not pumpkin pie, but the mathematical pi. So mathematically, pi is defined as an irrational mathematical constant, defined as the ratio of the circumference, the area around the circle, or the distance around a circle, divided by the diameter of that circle. So irrational means that the number goes on and on and on and never really repeats itself. So 3.145, 159, etc., etc., etc. It just goes on and on like that. And since pi is irrational, we can only really work with approximations. So in this chapter, the thing we're working on, the problem we're working on, is looking at different ways of getting approximations for that number pi. And in the process, then, we'll be learning some new concepts in programming. So let's start with some simple ones. Here are three different approximations of pi. 22 divided by 7, 355 divided by 113, or 9,801 divided by 2,206 times the square root of 2. So let's take a look at those in Python in our Jupyter notebook. So I have those set up here in this Chapter 2 Jupyter notebook, which you can download and then upload into your Colab environment. So if I do 22 divided by 7, once it connects and establishes the runtime here, we will see our result, 3.1428, which is not bad, but this should be a better approximation, 355 divided by 113. Oh, there we go, 3.14159, so we're getting better. And we can get even more accurate if we do the last fraction there. And for this one, we're going to use the math module. Remember that we get into, or we access modules by doing the import statement, then the name of the module, and then we can access a function in that module by the module name dot, and in this case, we're using the square root. So let's take a look at this. 3.1415927, and presumably that's a better approximation of pi than the previous ones. So we have those. Before we get into some more sophisticated approximations, let's talk a little bit about the math module, and in particular about getting some help. So a module, as we just said, is a collection of pre-written Python code that has functions or objects in it that makes our lives easier. So it has, in the book's terminology, those abstractions already defined for us. And there's just a ton of them that are available to us in Python, just with the standard installation, to say nothing of all the different parts that we could install individually, for just a really wide variety of applications. So there is a function in Python to help get documentation about things called the help function. So there's a series of different things we can do. We can do help with the string modules as the parameter, and that will list all the available modules. Help with a particular module name will give the documentation on that module as a whole. And then if I want a function in there, help module dot function name as the string will give documentation on that particular function. So we'll look at that here in session 2.2. Also, do be aware that there is a lot of documentation on the web at docs.python.org/3, because that's the version of Python that we're using. So let's take a look at this session and see those things in action. The first one, if I want to see all the modules that are installed, I can use help with the string modules. Now this will take a while the first time you do it, because it's going out to the computer that's on the cloud and figuring out all the different stuff that is installed. So we'll let that run. And while that's running, I'm going to go ahead and execute the help math and help math.square root functions here. So if I do help math, eventually, once the previous one is done, it'll execute and give us just stuff about the math module. And then likewise, help math.square root will give us just the help on the square root function. I'm going to pause for just a second and then come back when all these are done so we can see the results. All right, so now those are complete. That was about another extra minute of time or so. That was the video was paused for, but this is all the modules that are loaded in our Jupyter Notebook environment from Colab. And then if we look at help math, this is a listing of all the different functions that are in the math module. Okay, and notice that there also are some constants, including a constant for pi. Again, this is just an approximation. And then this help math.square root, SQRT, gives us help on the square root function itself. All right, in our next video then, we'll go into the next part of this section, which deals with the Archimedes approach to estimating the value of pi.